Here is a list of 15 astonishing aspects of Swedish life. Most individuals would never even consider learning about these facts, and they are capable of leaving you utterly speechless. Each of these facts unveils unique characteristics of Swedish culture. They demonstrate how profoundly it diverges from the majority of other nations worldwide, and how highly it values freedom and respect for personal space. Let us commence with number 15. In Sweden, it is entirely lawful and perfectly acceptable to be in public places without any clothing. Envision this scenario. You are seated on a sunny beach. Suddenly, the person sitting next to you calmly disrobes, doing so without any self-consciousness. It is done as if it were completely normal. Impressive, is it not? And yet, in this country, such behavior is not uncommon. Public nudity is not considered a violation of the law here. It is not prohibited whatsoever. Be it a beach, a sauna, or even certain parks, people freely walk around without clothes. Nobody pays any attention to it. It surprises no one, and no one stares. It is not regarded as provocation or anything indecent. Rather, it is a manifestation of body freedom, which is absolutely normal and customary for Swedes. In this country, respect for personal space and for one's own body is not a challenge to society, but a perfectly natural cultural standard. However, before deciding to take such a step and become a nudist, it is important to understand that there is a specific place and time for it. For instance, if you suddenly decide to remove your clothing right in a shopping center or in a furniture store, such as IKEA, this could end very negatively. Therefore, to avoid finding yourself in an awkward situation, it is best to ascertain in advance where and when such behavior is appropriate. Otherwise, you might find yourself in a situation that evokes only bewilderment and incomprehension. It may seem that all of this is something exotic or even shocking. However, perhaps the main secret lies precisely in these peculiarities, in the fact that Swedes are so free and uninhibited that they perceive their bodies and their manifestation as a natural part of life. And if you are not yet accustomed to such openness, then perhaps the surprise is not in them at all, but in us, in our perceptions and stereotypes. Welcome to a country where tranquility and freedom have acquired other, more profound semantic nuances. Let us proceed to number 14. In Sweden, sexism is not simply a condemned shortcoming, but a phenomenon that is practically disappearing from public life. Here, street flirting and sidelong glances are not merely a rarity, but rather an exception that evokes surprise. In this country, unwanted manifestations and displays of disrespect toward women are viewed very strictly. To say something inappropriate or offensive or to behave improperly in the office means risking your career and reputation. In the worst-case scenario, it could cost you your job or even entail legal consequences. If you decide to lecture a woman in public or behave rudely, be prepared for those around you to look at you with a cold antipathy, which may be even colder than the Scandinavian winter itself. However, all of this is not done for show or to demonstrate correct values. Everything is built into the system: governmental policy, labor laws, and even kindergartens. Everything is aimed at eradicating gender inequality from the earliest stages of upbringing. In schools and in society as a whole, the idea is ingrained that equality is not just words, but a reality that needs to be supported and developed. In Swedish institutions and families, there is no place for jokes or comments that could potentially offend or humiliate someone. Here, it is considered that such displays are inappropriate and inadmissible. Some people from other countries look at this and think that, in Sweden, everything is too confined within the framework of political correctness, or that freedom of expression is too limited. However, it is precisely this strictness and consistency that allow the country to maintain its status as one of the leading in the world in terms of gender equality. While in a number of states, traditions and views rooted in the 1950s still exist, Swedish culture contains a multitude of unusual and at times surprising rules that radically differ from our customary notions of upbringing, ethics, and social communication. One such rule is the balance between protection and strictness. Moreover, it often seems that softness, rather than rigid frameworks, dominates this system. Parents ponder the question, is the power of children in our country not excessively expanded? This question is very pertinent, for who is right in the final analysis? Those who establish rigid rules and restrictions, or the children growing up in conditions where their voice and rights sound louder and more important? One thing is clear: Swedish upbringing is not simply a distinction, it is a complete reboot of the entire system of approach to the formation of personality. Here, each element, each rule, is a part of a special culture that has formed over centuries and has become its integral part. All right, before we continue, if you are enjoying learning about these unique cultural insights, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button for more fascinating content. Now let us move on to number 12. In Swedish culture, there is one hidden but very important unwritten rule that, like an invisible rod, governs the entire social atmosphere. To violate it means to encounter silent condemnation, which manifests itself not in words, but in gestures and glances. Swedes will not directly reproach or correct you if you violate this rule. Instead, they will silently, without words, judge you in the depths of their souls, expressing their attitude with inner silence and rejection. This rule is called Jantelagen, not a law in the strict sense of the word, but rather a way of thinking, an internal mindset that permeates all of Swedish culture. The translation of this word is, do not say that you are better than others. Its most important message is to never behave as if you are superior to those around you, to demonstrate your success or achievements publicly and provocatively. Under no circumstances should you boast or flaunt your victories, be it a promotion at work or the purchase of a luxury automobile. If you have managed to buy a new car or build a modern house, it is important to remember not to flaunt these achievements. Do not make boastful posts on social networks, and do not talk about your successes in public. The more you downplay your achievements, and the more modestly you behave, the more respect you will gain in the eyes of those around you. It may seem that this sounds strange, especially for those who are accustomed to open demonstrations of their status and success. However, this is not simply a manifestation of modesty. It is part of a unique way of life that has shaped the Swedish people. In their understanding, to live, work, and communicate means adhering to this unwritten rule. In the office, in friendly conversations, even in a store, modesty acts not simply as a recommendation, but as the default norm of behavior. Try boasting about your achievements, and you will see that you will not be condemned directly. Rather, you will simply be quietly excluded from the general circle. Therefore, when you next want to share your joy, it is worth remembering that in Sweden, status and respect are expressed not through words, but through silence. An important rule under number 11 is a strict requirement regarding a child's name. Here, in order to name a baby, it is necessary to obtain approval from the government. And if you decide to give your child a name like Bli Thunder or Little Cucumber, that is up to you. However, in Sweden, you will have to undergo a special check. The name must pass a governmental examination, and this is a very serious process. The Swedish state has the right to reject any name that it deems inappropriate or uncomfortable. The law on names is created to protect children from offensive, nonsensical, or mocking names. So, if you dream of naming your child Dragon Lord, you had better forget about it. You will be rejected. Not only the first name, but also the second names. Spelling, unusual letters, or hyphens are all subject to verification. If the name does not meet the requirements, the parents will receive an official letter indicating that their child's name is too strange for society. It is important to note that parents have only 3 months to submit the chosen name. If you miss this deadline, the name will be chosen without you. This phrase may seem like a scene from a horror film, evoking anxiety and a sense of horror. However, in reality, it is not at all a manifestation of some dark or cruel side. On the contrary, in Sweden, as in many other countries, it represents one of the most deeply rooted and respected cultural norms, which may seem cold and even detached to foreigners. Welcome to one of those unwritten rules of Swedish etiquette that are not openly discussed and that may surprise foreign guests with their unusual strictness. This rule states, never invite anyone to dinner without prior arrangement. This is how Swedish culture is arranged. Everything must be planned in advance. Everything is according to schedule and according to the rules. This topic became popular on the internet when someone decided to share a story from their childhood that occurred in Sweden. It told how a child was at a friend's house, and when it came time for dinner, the host calmly said, "Wait here," and went to eat, leaving the child alone. This situation caused a real shock among internet users. For many it seemed rude and unfriendly. However, for Swedes, such behavior is quite commonplace. and it is not at all associated with rudeness or impoliteness. In their culture, it is a manifestation of respect for personal boundaries and for another's time. In Sweden, planning and independence are valued, and any unexpected interference in the daily routine or diet is perceived as a manifestation of impoliteness. For foreigners accustomed to a more hospitable approach, such an attitude seems cold, even indifferent. However, for Swedes, it is a manifestation of respect for personal freedom. Here, it is not assumed that everything should happen by default. Everything is decided and agreed upon in advance. If you want to have dinner at someone's house, you absolutely must plan it in the calendar and agree on a time. If you are indeed invited, it means that you have become part of a special event, an important part of the family or friendship circle. In such a case, you are not simply a guest, but almost a member of the family. However, you should not come with an unexpected company or with several uninvited friends, hoping for a quick and easy snack. Next time you find yourself in Sweden and your stomach starts to loudly remind you of itself, it is best to take a small snack with you, because hospitality here is not something self-evident, but a pre-planned and agreed-upon event. And honestly, the phrase, "wait here," may be the most polite form of refusal, which can simultaneously hurt or upset, for it so directly and clearly says, "I cannot or do not want to right now." This is one of those situations where politeness is combined with a sense of personal boundaries. And that is why this phrase is often perceived as the most correct but also quite painful refusal. Let us move on to the next aspect. Imagine that you think that Sweden is only snowflakes, saunas, and the group ABBA. This is certainly a very popular and recognizable image that many associate with this country. However, unsurprisingly, there is another side to the coin. In some areas of Swedish cities, even local residents prefer to avoid walking, and sometimes they bypass entire neighborhoods altogether. There are territories in the country that are officially designated as high-risk zones, and it is best not to go there without special necessity. This is not some advertising cliché or sensational headline. These are real areas with a certain status that have been singled out by the Swedish authorities as dangerous due to the level of crime, the presence of unrest, and the activity of gangs. Within these zones, the situation is more complex than it seems at first glance. People live in these areas, despite their status, many of whom face difficulties, weak integration into society, high unemployment, and the presence of organized criminal groups. There have been recorded cases of grenade attacks, such that even in the most exciting computer games, such a thing is not number 8. In Swedish culture, it is absolutely unacceptable to work overtime. Overtime is not considered an achievement here. Rather, on the contrary, it can harm your reputation. Imagine that while many countries of the world are proud of their labor endurance, long shifts, and late nights in the office, Swedes quietly ask the question, "Why are you still in the workspace when the workday has long ended?" For them, staying at work after the established time is not a heroic act, but rather suspicious. There is a clear understanding in society that if a person stays in the office for a long time, it may mean that they manage their time poorly or are trying to overshadow colleagues. Such behavior is perceived as unsightly and unnecessary. A special rhythm reigns in Sweden, a rhythm based on the balance between work and personal life. If someone burns the midnight oil, that is, works late, no one will praise or applaud them. Rather, those around them will look surprised and wonder what is wrong with that person. And that is not all. In Sweden, vacation is a sacred thing. Most Swedes take a minimum of 4 weeks of vacation in the summer. And if someone tries to skip it or refuse vacation, it will be perceived as strange. Working during this period is almost offensive because vacation is considered an important part of life. There is a simple unwritten rule here. Do your job well and leave on time. You should not consider the office your home or a mailbox that you can look into endlessly. In Sweden, no one pats you on the back when someone is the last to leave the workday. Even meetings try not to be scheduled for the evening hours. After all, a brainstorming session at 4 o'clock in the afternoon is the maximum that is accepted. At this time, people are already thinking about forest cabins, silence, and tranquility, disconnected from the digital world. Therefore, if you are used to considering sleepless nights a manifestation of dedication to the cause, think again. In Swedish culture, true coolness is the ability to take a deep breath, get out of the system on time, and at the same time, remain a professional of the highest level. Number 7. You should never think that you are better than others.